The average millionaire is 58 years old. I want you to sit with that number for a moment. 58, that's probably older than you expected, right? Maybe you pictured 30-something tech founders or crypto bros on Twitter flashing Lamborghinis. That number is completely misleading, and it might be costing you decades of wealth. See, when we talk about the average millionaire, we're looking at a snapshot of everyone who currently has $1 million or more. And guess what? Most of those people are older because they've had more time. It's not that they became millionaires at 58, it's that 58 is when we're counting them. The actual journey started decades earlier, often in their 20s and 30s, with decisions most people completely overlook. Here's what's actually happening right now. In 2025, we crossed 80 million millionaires globally. That's nearly 1% of all adults on the planet with $1 million or more in net assets. And get this, 684,000 new millionaires were created in 2024 alone. That's over 1,000 people crossing the $1 million threshold every single day just in the United States. But here's where it gets interesting. Only 7 to 9% of millionaires are under 40, which means if you're 28 and wondering why you're not wealthy yet, congratulations, you're statistically exactly where you should be. The wealth game isn't a sprint. It's a marathon disguised as a sprint by social media. Now, I'm going to break down exactly when most people hit each major wealth milestone: $100,000, $500,000, and $1 million. And I promise you, these ages are not what you've been led to believe. Some will be more encouraging than you expected. Others might light a fire under you. But all of them will give you a realistic map of what wealth building actually looks like for normal people, not trust fund kids or lottery winners. We'll look at the data, understand the math that makes it all work, and most importantly, figure out how you can potentially compress your own timeline. Because while averages tell us what's typical, they don't tell us what's possible. But before we get to the ages, we need to talk about the milestone nobody discusses. And it's not $1 million. Chapter 1: The $100,000 Truth. Everyone obsesses over becoming a millionaire. It's the dream, right? 7 figures. But here's the truth that most financial gurus won't tell you. The first $100,000 is actually the hardest milestone you'll ever hit. Not the million, the 100,000. Charlie Munger, Warren Buffett's partner and one of the greatest investors who ever lived, said something that stuck with me. It took him 14 years to accumulate his first $100,000. 14 years. But then, he went from $100,000 to $1 million in just 6 more years. The first stretch was the mountain. Everything after was downhill. Why is that? Because when you're building your first $100,000, you're doing almost all the heavy lifting yourself. Your savings are small. Your investment returns are small because the base is small. 10% of $5,000 is $500. Meaningful, sure, but not life-changing. But 10% of $100,000, that's $10,000. Your money starts pulling real weight. Look, I know checking your net worth and then immediately closing the app is basically a sport at this point. We've all done that thing where we calculate everything we own, include our car at a generous valuation, maybe forget to subtract the student loans, and still feel behind. That's normal. That's the $100,000 grind. Well, the median net worth for Americans under 35 is just $13,900. If you're in your early 30s with $30,000 or $40,000 saved, you're actually ahead of most people your age. But nobody talks about this because it's not sexy. Nobody's making TikToks about having $40,000 in index funds. This is the milestone that separates people who build wealth from people who don't. It's not glamorous, it's not fast, but it's the foundation everything else is built on. So when do most people actually cross this first finish line? The answer might surprise you. Chapter 2: When people actually hit $100,000. All right, let's get specific. When do most people actually hit $100,000 in net worth? Based on Federal Reserve data and multiple wealth studies, the answer is somewhere between 32 and 37 years old. That's the sweet spot where median net worth crosses into six figures for the first time. Now, this varies wildly by profession and geography. Engineers, finance professionals, and doctors tend to hit it earlier, often late 20s to early 30s. Teachers, service workers, and creatives typically take longer, but many still get there by their late 30s or early 40s. Here's something interesting though. The 35 to 44 age group saw a 44% jump in median net worth recently, landing at around $91,300. That massive leap is largely driven by one thing: home equity. When people in this age range buy their first home, their net worth often jumps dramatically, even if their liquid savings haven't changed much. But there's another trend emerging. Millennials and Gen Z are actually reaching the first $100,000 faster than previous generations in some ways. Digital investment platforms like Robinhood and Acorns made investing accessible. Robo-advisors eliminated the need for expensive financial advisors. And yes, some younger people caught crypto and stock market waves that compressed their timelines significantly. The data shows that roughly 684,000 new millionaires emerged in 2024 alone. These aren't all people who won the lottery. Many started as regular savers who hit $100,000, then $200,000, then watched compounding work its magic over 10 to 20 years. So if you're 30 and haven't hit $100,000 yet, you're not behind. You're tracking with the majority. If you're 35 and you're there, you're doing well. And if you're 25 and already close, you're setting yourself up for something special. But here's where the math gets interesting. Once you hit $100,000, something changes, and it changes so much. Chapter 3. The compounding inflection point. Here's the thing about compound interest that nobody explains well. The first $100,000 is a mountain. The next $100,000 is a hill. By $500,000, you're running downhill. And by the time you're approaching $1 million, gravity is doing most of the work. Let me make this concrete. If you start investing $100 per month at age 25, earning an average 7% annual return, you'll have about $1 million by age 65. Just $100 a month. But here's where it gets wild. Wait until 35 to start, and you'll need to invest $220 per month to reach the same goal. Start at 45, you're looking at over $500 per month. That's not linear math. That's exponential. Time isn't just valuable, it's the multiplier that makes everything else work. Think about it this way. When you have $10,000 invested and earn 7%, you make $700 that year. Nice, but not transformative. When you have $100,000 invested at that same 7%, you earn $7,000. That's almost equal to what many people save in an entire year, and it happened while you slept. By $500,000, that same 7% is $35,000 per year. Your money is now earning more than the median individual income in America. You're essentially employing your wealth as a second worker who never takes a day off. This is why every year matters so much in your 20s and 30s. Not because you'll save massive amounts, you probably won't, but because every dollar you invest early gets decades to compound. Every dollar you invest at 25 is worth roughly $4 invested at 45, assuming 7% returns. The math isn't fair, but once you understand it, you can use it to your advantage. Now let's talk about that middle milestone that everyone skips, $500,000. Chapter 4. The forgotten $500,000. Nobody makes Instagram posts about hitting $500,000. It's the financial equivalent of middle management, unglamorous but absolutely essential. Yet this milestone might be the most important one in your entire wealth journey. Here's why. At $500,000, passive income starts to become real. At 4% withdrawal, that's $20,000 per year. At 7% returns, you're generating $35,000 annually before you lift a finger. You're not wealthy yet, but you're financially dangerous. You have options most people never achieve. When do people typically hit this number? The data suggests somewhere between 45 and 52 for median achievers. But for consistent savers who started early and avoided lifestyle inflation, it can come in the late 30s or early 40s. This is also where wealth sources start diversifying. The path to $100,000 is usually pure savings and maybe a 401k match. The path to $500,000 typically involves some combination of home equity, business ownership, stock options, or rental property. About 45% of wealthy individuals have some business equity at this stage. The second quartile of American net worth starts at $357,000. So when you cross $500,000, you're solidly in the top half of all households. You're no longer building from scratch, you're building from momentum. And here's the psychological shift that happens. At $500,000, the million doesn't seem impossible anymore. It's not some abstract dream. It's math. It's time. It's inevitable if you stay the course. And then there's the big one, the milestone everyone dreams about. Let's talk about who actually gets there. Chapter 5. The Everyday Millionaire, Not Who You Think. Here's the image of a millionaire in your head. Private jets, yachts, probably a weird obsession with watches, definitely a house with too many bathrooms. Here's the reality. 70% of millionaires have between $1 and $5 million. They're not flying private. They're driving Camrys. They're bringing lunch to work. They have a weird obsession with not paying full price for anything. It's less Wolf of Wall Street and more Coupon Dad of suburban Connecticut. These are what researchers call everyday millionaires, or e-millies, and they've quadrupled since 2000 to over 52 million globally. Their collective wealth in that $1 to $5 million bracket totals $107 trillion. That's not a rounding error. That's a massive economic force of normal people who built wealth through consistency, not lottery tickets. The average age to hit millionaire status? About 58, built through decades of boring decisions. The professions that show up most often: engineers, accountants, teachers with side businesses, doctors, and small business owners. Not celebrities, not influencers, not crypto traders, though a few of those sneak in. 75% of millionaires still rely primarily on employment income. They're not living off investments and sipping cocktails on beaches. They're working jobs, maxing out 401ks, and probably still checking prices at the grocery store out of habit. Here's what this means for you. The path to $1 million isn't about being exceptional. It's about being consistent for an exceptional amount of time. It's about making good decisions repeatedly, for decades, until the math inevitably tips in your favor. You don't need to be special. You need to not quit. But here's where generational dynamics enter the picture. And yes, we need to talk about boomers. Appreciate you sticking around. If you liked what you heard, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and drop a comment. I'd love to hear your take. And if you know someone who'd enjoy this, share it with them. Chapter 6. The Generational Wealth Reality. Okay, let's address the elephant in the room. Baby boomers hold 51.4% of all wealth in the United States. Millennials, just 9.4%, despite being roughly the same size population-wise. If that makes you want to flip a table, I get it. The 65 to 74 age group has a median net worth about 19 times higher than those under 35. 19 times. That's not a gap. That's a canyon. Now, I know what you're thinking. Boomers had it easier. And in some ways, that's true. Housing was cheaper relative to income. College didn't require a second mortgage. Single incomes could support families. These are real structural advantages that created generational wealth at scale. But before this becomes a doom scroll, here's the flip side. Millennials and Gen Z are actually reaching the first $100,000 faster than previous generations in many cases. Why? Technology, Digital investment platforms eliminated barriers to entry. Information that used to cost thousands in financial advisor fees is now free on YouTube. Crypto, for all its volatility, created legitimate wealth for early adopters. And remote work opened up income opportunities that didn't exist 20 years ago. Here's the avocado toast math that drives me crazy. If you skipped avocado toast every single week for 30 years, you'd save about $40,000. That's not a house. That's not even a new car anymore. Can we please retire this advice? The generational wealth gap is real, but it's not destiny. The bottom 25% of net worth saw a 2,814% increase in recent years. Starting from the bottom doesn't mean staying there. But something massive is about to change this equation, and it's already started. Chapter 7. The $83 trillion transfer. The largest wealth transfer in human history is happening right now. $83 trillion is moving from baby boomers to younger generations over the next 2 to 3 decades. In the US alone, that's $29 trillion changing hands. This isn't speculation. This is demographic math. Boomers hold the wealth, and they're aging. That wealth has to go somewhere. Children, grandchildren, charities, or the government if no estate planning happens. Currently, about 23% of wealthy individuals cite inheritance as a significant income source. That number is going to climb dramatically. Spouse-to-spouse wealth transfers alone account for $9 trillion globally. But here's what most people miss about wealth transfers. They don't just benefit direct heirs. When trillions of dollars move between generations, it creates economic ripples. Housing markets shift. Investment patterns change. New businesses get funded. Opportunities emerge for people who are positioned to capture them. 128,000 millionaires are expected to physically migrate in 2025 alone, moving their wealth to new countries, new markets, new investments. Money is restless, and it's looking for returns. Now, I'm not saying wait around hoping for an inheritance. That's a terrible strategy. What I'm saying is this: the economic landscape is shifting. The opportunities for wealth creation in the next 20 years will look different than the last 20. And the people who understand where money is flowing will have advantages. So how do you actually compress your timeline? Let's get tactical. Chapter 8. The timeline accelerators. All right, here's where we get practical. What actually compresses the timeline from $100,000 to $500,000 to $1 million? Let's look at what the data shows. First, index fund. About 70% of everyday millionaires built their wealth primarily through low-cost index fund investing, not stock picking, not timing the market, just boring, consistent contributions to diversified funds over decades. It's not exciting, but it works. Second, side income that compounds. Not side hustles you spend, side income you invest. The data shows that side gigs, when the income is consistently invested rather than consumed, can accelerate the $100,000 timeline by 5 to 10 years. Third, real estate. This is the silent millionaire in your 50s path. Buy a house, pay it down, maybe acquire a rental property. Real estate forces savings through mortgage payments and builds equity through appreciation. It's slower than the stock market in some periods, faster in others, but it's tangible and leverageable. Fourth, equity compensation. This has become huge, now representing up to 43% of compensation for wealthy individuals in certain industries. If your employer offers stock options, or RSUs, understanding and optimizing these can be worth hundreds of thousands over a career. Fifth, business ownership. About 45% of wealthy individuals have business equity as a significant asset. This doesn't mean quitting your job to start a startup. It can mean a side business, a partnership, or eventually acquiring an existing business. Sixth, tax optimization. Roth conversions, tax loss harvesting, maximizing deductible contributions. Boring? Yes. Worth potentially $500,000 or more over a lifetime? Also, yes. 89% of wealthy individuals use investments as a primary wealth building tool. You don't need all 6 strategies. You need 1 or 2 that fit your situation. Now let's build your specific timeline. Chapter 9, Your Real Timeline. Let's get personal for a moment. I want you to think about 3 numbers: your current age, your current net worth, and the gap between where you are and where you want to be. Here's the benchmark reality. Median U.S. net worth is about $121,700. The average is $748,800, but that's heavily skewed by the ultra-wealthy. The top 10% starts at about $3.8 million median. So where do you fall? If you're 25 with $10,000 saved, you're ahead of the median for your age. If you're 35 with $100,000, you're doing well. If you're 45 with $300,000, you're tracking toward millionaire status by traditional retirement age. But here's what the data also shows. Starting low isn't destiny. The bottom 25% of net worth holders saw a 2,814% increase in recent years. That's people going from nearly nothing to meaningful wealth. It happens. It's happening right now. Your timeline depends on 3 variables: your savings rate, your investment returns, and your time horizon. You control 2 of those directly and 1 partially through asset allocation. If you can save 20% of your income and invest it at 7% average returns, the math becomes simple but powerful. Run the numbers for your specific situation. There are dozens of free calculators that will show you exactly when you'll hit each milestone based on your inputs. The point isn't to compare yourself to averages. It's to know your numbers and work your plan. Now for the strategies that actually move the needle. Chapter 10, The Strategies That Actually Work. Let me give you the framework that actually works, distilled from what wealthy people consistently do. First, automate everything. The moment your paycheck hits, money should automatically move to investments. Remove the decision. Remove the friction. Remove the opportunity to spend it first. This single habit separates wealth builders from everyone else. Second, the 50% rule if you can swing it. Live on half your income, invest the rest. I know, that sounds impossible for most people. But even moving from saving 10% to saving 20% dramatically compresses your timeline. Every percentage point matters. Third, embrace boring. Index funds beat active management over the long term about 85% of the time. You don't need to find the next Amazon. You need to own the whole market and wait. Fourth, pick your lane. Real estate works. Index funds work. Business ownership works. What doesn't work is chasing every strategy simultaneously. Pick 1 or 2 approaches that fit your skills and circumstances, then execute consistently. Fifth, start with $100 per month if that's what you have. Remember the math. $100 monthly at 7% starting at 25 equals roughly $1 million by 65. You don't need to start big. You need to start. You don't need to be exceptional. You need to be consistent for an exceptional amount of time. The wealthy aren't smarter than you. They're not luckier than you. They just kept doing the boring things longer than everyone else who quit. There's one more thing, and it's the most important. Every year you wait past 25 to start investing costs you approximately $100,000 in final wealth. That's not an exaggeration. That's the math of compounding working against you instead of for you. Every year matters. But here's what I want you to understand. Every millionaire was once someone who thought $1 million was impossible. They weren't born knowing the math. They weren't born with some special wealth-building gene. They just started, kept going, and let time do the heavy lifting. 684,000 people became new millionaires last year. Over 1,000 people cross that threshold every single day. They're not all tech founders or inheritors. Most of them are the quiet, consistent savers who just didn't quit. Wealth isn't built in moments of inspiration. It's built in years of boring consistency. It's built in automated transfers that happen whether you're motivated or not. It's built in saying no to things you can afford because you have bigger goals. Here's your 30-day challenge. Open an investment account if you don't have one. Set up an automatic transfer of whatever you can afford. $50, $100, $500. Start. The amount matters less than the starting. And yes, when you're 58 and a millionaire, you can finally argue about the thermostat in your house. That's the dream we're building toward. But this isn't really about the money. It's about options. It's about freedom. It's about not being trapped by circumstances because you prepared for a future you couldn't see yet. The best time to start was 10 years ago. The second best time is today. You now know more about wealth timelines than 90% of people. The only question left is, what are you going to do about it?